Welcome to Events Heist, the podcast game show about post-COVID events and the event managers that run them. In this episode, you'll be hearing from Paul and Jim. Paul is the vice chair of the Corporate Event Marketing Association, CEMA. Hear him talk about a date auction he organized back in college and his experience eating cod sperm at an event. Jim is the VP for Marketing and Industry Relations at Fern Expo and a member of the CEMA Executive Board. Hear him talk about his favorite celebrity, Jimmy Russell, whom he met during an event. Paul, you've rolled a 3. So show is going to be rolling and moving. All right. So Paul, tell me, how many years have you been in events?
Well, realistically, I've been in events for 18 years. Right after graduating from college, I jumped into events and started at a beautiful golf resort, planning their conventions and meetings shortly after graduation.
Awesome. All righty, Jim, you've rolled a 2 and you're going up the ladder. Nice one. Okay, so you've already told us how many years you've been in industry. How did you get involved in events?
Wow. So my involvement in events actually started in college. I was involved in the campus activities board and ran some events on the side. You know, it was to make some extra money and get some spending money. I think it today would be called a side hustle. But that's really where I got the bug for events and transitioned that into a career.
Fantastic. All right, Paul, you've rolled a 6.
Nice.
I think you're going to go up the ladder too. It's moving along nicely. Excellent. All right, Paul, tell us about the first event that you remember organizing. It doesn't have to be professional, could be as a kid, any event, just the first event that pops to mind.
Well, the first event that pops to mind is actually one of the, is not unsimilar to Jim. It was in college. I was a resident advisor at this fantastic co-ed dorm, and we were raising money for a charity within our dorm. And so my buddy and I, we organized this awesome date auction that took off, blew away all expectations. We had people singing, people dancing, some probably unseemly things, but it was fantastic. And the stories live on, but we'll leave those back at the dorm.
So just for people that don't know what a date auction is, including myself, I think I know what it is, but can you explain the concept?
So yeah, the idea was obviously we were raising money for a charity within in college at the university, and in that context, we'd have different RAs, resident advisors, so they basically governed the floor and made sure that nothing crazy happened on their floor. And so each of the resident advisors was then auctioned off on a date. So their floor could bid on them. Somebody that was interested in them may bid on a date for them. And then we had all of these awesome opportunities, everything from like bowling alley dates to Sky Suite at the football game dates to just crazy things like an ice cream shop, like an underground ice cream shop, all of these things. So then you would bid on that person, and then the top spenders got priority choice over the date options. So one of the most interesting scenarios was, multiple people going in together, so you have a group date. It was fun though, but my buddy Thomas, I remember him dancing around with a rose in his mouth, and he also could sing, so he did a little performance to raise some money and raise some funds, all for a good cause. It was a lot of fun.
See, that's what was missing in my college experience. That didn't have anything like that here.
What I want to know is where Paul was in the continuum of who paid for the most. Like, were you in the top 10%, Paul?
Oh,
were you in the bottom
question.
10%?
Good question. How did you rank, Paul?
No, it was fun. I was fortunate enough, but I think I also got some sympathy donations I strategically pushed myself towards the end, and two volleyball players from my floor kind of went in and bid me up. So that was fun.
It sounds like some great stories there. All right, Jim, you rolled a 4. Okay, so I'm going to ask you the same question. What's the first event you remember organizing?
I feel bad because Paul did his event for a good cause, but the first event I remember organizing was in college, but it was a booze cruise. So I went to college in South Central Pennsylvania. We were about an hour from Baltimore's Inner Harbor, and we actually leased a large boat and got some school buses and took people from the campus down to Baltimore and had a DJ and a boat and went out cruising around Baltimore's Inner Harbor for 3 to 4 hours with cheap draft beer and pretzels and setups. And, one of the big reasons we did that was the drinking age in Maryland at the time was 18, and the drinking age in Pennsylvania, where I went to college, was 21. So basically, this was a reason to get all the underclassmen to a place where they could go have some fun. Ended up doing that and ran 2 of those a year. So
Genius.
it was a great way to make some money, have some fun. And there were some great stories that came from that, occasionally leaving a student behind in Baltimore that didn't make the bus.
Sounds great. Have you met any celebrities on a job, Paul? And if so, what were they like?
We hosted the Revlon's 100-year anniversary on the causeway at the Walt Disney World Swan and Dolphin. There's a beautiful fountain that cascades down. It was all glittered in diamonds. Gosh, we had so many top models there. Bo Garrett was there, Eva Mendes, and it was actually Eva Mendez's birthday. So the fun thing was that we had this big event, and one of my really dear friends, actually, her son is my godson, and so she was operating the program. I was supporting the program. From a sales perspective, we all ended up in a big, huge presidential suite with the top models from Revlon, and it was just a great party. It was a great party all around, and celebrating her birthday too. So,
Jim, you rolled a 5. All right, Jim, you've gone down a manhole. So, what's your favorite post-event junk food, drink, stress relief activity?
An Irish car bomb, some Bailey's, Guinness, Jameson, and but as I've matured, it's definitely a good old fashioned or a good bourbon old fashioned.
Okay, Paul, you rolled a 1, and you're down the manhole too. What do you love and or hate about events?
What I really love is getting everybody together and the synergy that occurs. I mean, the exchange of ideas and getting people with commonalities and a common goal right together. That collaboration of ideas is just energizing to me. And I think it's, as a social type person, I get a lot of energy out of that type of environment. In terms of what do I dislike is, there's not a lot that I dislike. I would just say, depending on the duration or depending on the extent, that can be exhausting. But other than that, I think, getting people together and getting people moving in the same direction is exhilarating. So.
Wow. Can you describe the moment that you knew COVID was going to turn the industry upside down?
It was March 12th of 2020. Just there was something about that day. We had a company call. There were some things that were happening, and I just stepped back and looked and said, this is going to be bigger than us, and we need to buckle down.
Okay, Paul, you've rolled a 5. All right, nice. Up the ladder. Same question. What was the moment you knew it wasn't going to end anytime soon?
That Friday, the 13th, I remember being one of the last, March 13th, one of the last days, and when it really became super real.
So what do you miss about in-person events, and what do you not miss?
I certainly miss the face-to-face interaction, the collaboration that happens, organically, and the feeding off of each other from, an intellectual standpoint, and those conversations that, start off and then you end up somewhere, right, with people kind of getting into the, into the dialogue. I don't miss the grind of travel, right? I mean, it's, when you're doing this for a living, your tendency is to catch the very last flight out of town to go somewhere, and you catch the first flight home when you can.
Paul, you wrote a 4.
Is that the same one?
Oh,
Down the same one, man.
that's a shame.
I think we're going to have to progress to speed round. What kind of industries have you done events for, and what was your favorite?
In terms of being favorites, I wouldn't say I have a favorite industry. Certainly entertainment's fun. Certainly sports are fun, given some of the things I like. But I would say not industry, but those really progressive up and coming companies that are just emerging. It's great to see the transformation year over year. Like, maybe a company that's just pre-IPO and then goes IPO or something like that. And just to see the dynamic and the shift and the development, I think that is the most exciting for me in the event space.
Jim, have you met any celebrities on the job?
I would probably say my two favorite at opposite ends of the spectrum were the opportunity I had to meet Bono. Being a good Irishman, there was a lot of joy there, and part of that was, long story short, I was with some customers we were doing a pre-event activity, and he came on stage during our pre-event tour with the customers, and the fact that he took the time to talk to the customers meant a lot to me, certainly meant a lot to them. And the other person I got to meet was Jimmy Russell, who's the master distiller of Wild Turkey Bourbon. And I had the opportunity to have dinner with him, and he's just such a kind gentleman and a wealth of knowledge, and certainly opposite ends of the spectrum. But, and I think part of it was because at the end of the day, they were just good people. They were just good humans.
Paul, tell us about the most stressful event you've ever organized.
You know what? I'm going to use a lifeline on that.
There you go. Nice. All right. So you get to move up to where Jim is.
There was a pharmaceutical event that I did years ago, actually during a Teamster strike. And in the United States, certainly the Teamsters controlled all the trucking. We were moving things by train, and there was just a lot of anxiety around that event. We had, our client had a new executive director. There were challenges with obviously the logistics of the event. And then on top of that, we had weather issues that came on board. And so some of our staff was certainly tied, and it was just hard. I mean, it was just out and out hard. I mean, I think events are always challenging to some degree, but this one was like literally physically painful just because of what we had to go through.
Tell me about your fantasy event.
So pre-Marriott purchase of Starwood, that acquisition, Starwood had some epic sales incentive trips. And one of my good buddies, Marcos, used to run them. And we had talked many years in advance. And I was like, dude, we have to do a safari in South Africa. And so sure enough, a few years later, Starwood actually didn't even have a branded property in, within Kruger or any of the adjacent parks or anything like that. But somehow he pulled it off to be able to plan this. So it started in Cape Town. fantastic things. Diving with the great whites was epic. Anybody, I highly recommend that.
So what, I'm going to ask you the same question. What industries have you done events for, and what's your favorite?
Like Paul, I've worked across all industries, and for me, it's not the industry that makes the favorite; it's the client.
Mm.
I've had one of my favorite events is actually in the banking and financial industry, because I just think the world of the client.
So virtual events, are you a fan, not a fan?
I mean, nothing replaces Jim and I drinking, a bourbon, together in the same space. Nothing replaces, getting together with old friends. Nothing replaces just the energy and the touch and the feel and the hugs. Do virtual events have a spot? Absolutely, and I think they can do a lot and be very productive. However, there's nothing like that.
Who's your favorite speaker?
Ooh, put Simon Sinek right up there. I mean, I'm a big fan of his. I listen to his podcast. There's another gentleman by the name of Mike Staver who, I've heard speak, and I've had the ability to stay in touch with him, and we've spent some personal time together. But
what's the weirdest food you've eaten at an event?
Cod sperm soup. And
no wonder they didn't tell you what it was.
Tastes like chicken.
I imagine if they labeled that, no one would be eating it, but okay. That's a great one.
So it was, they have absolutely, but it was part of the lore, part of the presentation. And I'm telling my friend about this after the fact, and he's like, so you're saying you swallow? And I'm like,
what about virtual events? Are you a fan, not a fan?
I'm not a fan in the context of replacing live events.
Yes.
I think that, the success that any virtual event had over the past year, you can't discount the fact that it was a monopoly in the sense that they had no competition, right? I think that there is a place for virtual as a bridge between live events, but not as a replacement for live events. They're two different experiences. They bring different things to the table, and they create different levels of engagement.
Do you have any crazy, funny event stories you'd like to share?
I would say another epic event story was hosting a client event, having customers in the parade at Mardi Gras in New Orleans. I tell you what, like the days, they start relatively early and probably a few too many beverages throughout, starting with some Bloody Marys and fully stocked float going down through the streets of New Orleans. But I would say that is probably one of the most crazy and unique experiences that I've ever been a part of.
Awesome. Okay, Jim, you rolled a 7. What's the best example that you have? Oh, getting close.
Oh, look at that.
Nice. What's the best example that you've seen in your career of introducing gamification into an event?
I think that there's clients that have done that really well. I mean, I think that there's trade show clients have done it where they've gotten people to kind of run the floor and keep activity on the floor going. From a incentive perspective, there was a client once that, did a fabulous job as it related to an ongoing year-long gamification that kept people engaged. And I think it became something that extended the event, to the 365 days. And I think anytime you can use gamification to build activity before and after an event is really, really meaningful.
Have you read anything or watched anything that you would want to share with other event professionals?
Earlier, you asked Jim about one of his favorite speakers, and I have one of my favorite speakers that wrote a book. Adam Grant wrote a book called Give and Take, And that really changed my perspective on just relationships with people, and in terms of being a giver, in terms of contributing, and starting with a focus of giving, and knowing that that outpouring from our lives really can have an impact.
Do you have any good war stories you'd like to share?
I almost hesitate to talk about this one because unfortunately I was out of town, doing an event on 9/11 when the Twin Towers and the attacks occurred in the U.S. And but I learned a lot from that. We were doing an event. I learned a lot from the leadership of the organization. That the event that we were doing, we were 2/3 across the country in Denver. I learned a lot about my own leadership skills during that time because I was the senior member of a team at that point.
If you could have an event pet, any kind of pet during an event, what would it be?
Having a lion nearby is pretty awe-inspiring and epic. But in terms of an event pet, I think one of my favorite planners early in my career, she actually had a mascot for her company, and it was her pet. It was her dog. And I loved how she negotiated into the deal that they had a company just so she could squeeze it in, bring her dog with her as a companion and negotiate that into the contract.
Okay. What trends do you see occurring in the industry in the next, say, 2 to 3 years?
I think there's going to be kind of a leaning into, smaller regional events in some market segments and for some industries for various reasons. I know some organizations have talked about that for many years. I think the past year has given them reason to do that. I certainly think that there's going to be more, of a design-based thinking as it relates to the laying out of events and what an event looks like.
So if you could give one piece of advice for planning an event in the current climate, what would it be?
Environment is evolving so rapidly, and certainly different places in the world. You down in Australia, us in the United States, and even within different regions. Jim's up in the DC area. I'm down in Florida. As you see different segments of the United States or other areas of the world, it's different. So I think event planners have always been adaptable, and have always, had contingency plans and been very, done their best to be on their toes. But I think that's relevant even more right now, just to stay flexible, stay positive.
Okay, Jim rolled a 3. So during an event, if you could have an unlimited supply of one thing, what would it be?
Bourbon.
I've been waiting a long time for someone to say that on this show, and you've taken the prize, Jim. A long time, because that's my answer. So I love it. When do you think live events will return to your region?
Live events are already happening.
Sorry, I mean in person. To clarify,
in person are happening. We have thousands of people gathering here in Florida right now, throughout a number of parts of the United States.
Didn't you have a Bitcoin event that became infamous in Florida?
You know what? I don't know about that one specifically, but I do know, there's been events with tens of thousands of people, operated with a number of, precautions and done very successfully. But they've only really started, over the past month or two, in terms of that scale.
Yeah. Jim, you've rolled a 5. All right, now you're just going back.
I'm going backwards.
What do you think about hybrid events?
I don't think hybrid events exist for the meetings and events industry. I think if you think about what a hybrid event really is, I think it's going to be very, very challenging for event organizers to truly host a live event
Paul, how do you think screen fatigue is affecting virtual events and just events in general?
You don't get full engagement sometimes. You with those type of events, you get a broader scope. One of my great friends and persons that operates 40,000 person events, she was getting representation from 28 countries in a for an event live. But then when they reverted to, virtual, it went up to like about 47 countries. However, you look at the total engagement and it's depreciates quite a bit.
All right. Have you read anything or watched anything that you would share with other event professionals?
I'm a big podcast person. I'm a huge fan of, the Ted Daly podcast. And I think that for one of the reasons I like that is they're short, obviously the whole model of TED, but it makes you listen to things that you probably wouldn't otherwise listen to or pick. And so kind of get into that regimen of just listening to them every day, right? Because you learn something new.
Awesome. Okay, Paul, you wrote a 1 and you reached the mint. Good work. What do you think of the future of events will look like?
I mean, I think future events it's going to revert back to the fundamentals, right? It's sitting around the fire, telling stories and connecting on a very, personal level. And I think that's the future. And that's really the core, ever since the beginning, right?
Okay, Jim, you wrote a 1. And this will be the last question.
All right.
Okay, we're going to end with
a good one, Fab. Yeah.
Looking for a good one. Okay, what's the best or worst attendee story?
Female exhibitor had come down to the exhibit hall after move out right before the closing banquet. There was a formal closing banquet. She stepped on a piece of carpet tape, and I don't know if you've ever really stuck on carpet tape. It's pretty powerful, and literally like ripped her shoe right off her foot. She kind of went like tumbling down. Her ball gown rips to shreds, because it was pretty tight on her. It was just not, and we literally had to hand her a piece of booth draping for her to wrap around to go back to the hotel to change.
Awesome. Great answer to finish on.
Yeah.
So thanks so much, Paul and Jim, for being guests of Event Heist. It's been great having you on.